In this lesson, we'll use custom curves to match a shot. First, let's go back to our flag filtering. I'll choose cyan, and I'll turn off green. And we're left with these two aerial shots. I want to match this first shot to the second shot. Now, when using the RGB parade to match shots to each other, the goal is not necessarily to make the traces of each channel exactly match each other. That's usually impossible because there are different elements in the scene. Rather, the goal is to analyze and replicate the relationships between each of the channels. So with that being said, let's look at our first clip, the one we want to correct. It has bunched traces down in the shadows, representative mostly of the ground here, just about touching 0, up to about 256. Then there's a gap of no luminance values in these low midtones. Then we have good distribution of luminance in the midtones to the highlights, although the blues are elevated with very little blue in the midtones here. Let's compare this to the shot we're matching to, the second shot. Here our shadows are more compressed than the first shot, not quite to 0 and up to about 128 or 130. And we have more expanded midtones versus the first shot, especially in the red channel that's spread out quite a bit more. The green and the blue channels are a little more compressed, the blue a little bit more than the green. So if we want to match the first shot to the second shot, we want to do something similar with these relationships, have more bunched up shadow detail at the bottom, and have more of a staggered relationship between the red, green, and blue channels up top, with more spread in the red than the green and the blue. Now previously we grabbed a still of the shot we wanted to match to, but we can create a reference without even grabbing a still. To get started, let's select the first clip. Let's add a node with Option or Alt S, press the Tab key, our new shortcut, and name it. Next, I'll right-click on the second shot and choose Wipe Timeline Clip. Doing so engages the image wipe with this timeline clip, with no need to grab a still first. We saw earlier that Option or Alt W will allow you to swap the wipe, but you can also toggle the wipe off and on with Command or Control W. As opposed to the tractor shot, we don't need any resizing here because the shots are very similar in their composition. Rather than using the primary bars, this time we'll use custom curves. With the red curve isolated, my first goal is to compress the shadows to match the first shot. I'll shift-click to add a point down near the shadows and pull down. Notice as I'm pulling down that the other channels are moving at the same time. The reason this is happening is because by default, Resolve is maintaining luminance as I make adjustments. In other words, it's adjusting the other color channels to keep the brightness level the same. This is often what a colorist wants, so you can focus on adjusting color without making changes to luminance, but in this case it gets in the way. I'm going to right-click on that control point to delete it.
Now I'll reduce the Lumamix from the default of 100
down to 0. Now when I go back to my curve, shift-click to add a point and pull down, notice that just the red channel traces are moving and the green and blue channels stay still. And I'll attempt to compress those shadows about the same as our reference shot. By the way, you can set the Lumamix to default at 0. I'll press Shift-9 to go to Project Settings. In the General Options under Color, you can click this checkbox to default the luminance mixer to 0. I'll cancel that. Now I'll repeat this process with the green channel. I'll isolate it, shift-click to add a point, and pull down. And with the blue channel, I'll do the same thing. I've been able to compress these shadow traces to match the compression of our reference shot, but they're all a little lower. So I'm going to go to the primaries wheels to the offset and drag in the master wheel just to bump those up a little bit. And then tweak them to bring them down a little bit more. I'm also keeping my eye on the viewer to try to match the color as best I can. And I'll toggle the work so far off and on with Command or Control D. Now the ground in both shots matches much better in both color and luminance. Now to match the sky, we see a huge difference in the sky. There's a lot more cyan in our reference shot, cyan is a complementary color to red. So if we remove red, we should add cyan. And that matches what we're trying to do in the traces here. We've got red in the highlights that we don't have in our reference shot. So I'll isolate red, and I'll select the top control point and pull down. And we begin to introduce more cyan into the highlights. The clouds themselves are also cyan, and that's darker, so I'll add another control point by shift-clicking so I don't move the curve, somewhere in the mids and pull down there as well. I'm starting to affect the color of the ground, so I'll add another point closer to the shadows and push up a bit. I'll make sure my image wipe is selected and drag between those. Command or Control D to toggle that correction on and off. And we've managed to get quite close to the shot on the left. Another way to compare shots rather than wiping between them is to see both shots in their entirety in the viewer. I'll turn off the wipe. I'll shift-click to select both these shots. Then in the viewer, I'll right-click and choose Split Screen, Selected Clips. This way I can see all of each clip at the same time. Any clip that is selected reveals the nodes for that clip. So you continue to make adjustments while looking at both clips at the same time. I'll right-click and choose Current Group to get back to a full single view. So we've seen how we can use automatic shot matching or manual shot matching using either primaries wheels or primaries bars or custom curves, and creating references either by grabbing a still or creating a reference directly from the timeline.
You can add multiple playheads and base a split screen on those playhead locations.
So I'll go up to Clips and choose All Clips so I can see everything, and I'll also turn on the timeline. I'll scroll back and select this outside clip. If I go to the Color menu, I have the option to add up to 3 additional playheads. This feature itself is not new to Resolve 17. For example, I'll select playhead B, and now I can either click on a clip or move this playhead somewhere else in the timeline to select that clip. And now I have playhead A and playhead B, and I can click between them, or I can click on the thumbnails. I'll add another one, playhead C. I'll select this clip, and then I'll add another one, playhead D, and I'll select this clip. And you can change which clip is selected simply by moving the playhead to another location. Once you have them selected, if you right-click in the viewer, you can choose Split Screen, Playheads. And then based on that playhead position, you'll see each of those separate playheads as part of your split screen. And of course, you can move them and change them as well. So just another option for creating color corrections based on split playheads. When you're done, go back to the Color menu, go to Active Playhead, and choose Reset Playheads. And the reset to the currently active playhead. And I'll turn off the split screen. In the next lesson, we'll shift our attention to secondary color correction.